When Pastor asked me to tell how my mother being a missionary influenced my life, this is my mother. This was her visa passport in 1920. I had to think about that a lot. One thing is that it really gave me brownie points in elementary school when we studied China, because I had lots of things to go and show and tell. I have a few of them on the altar today. And I got to wear pants, and girls didn't wear pants to school. So by wearing a Chinese outfit, I got to wear pants to school. And I really, really awed them when I was able to eat spaghetti at the in the lunchroom with chopsticks. But when it comes down to my mother, I'm not sure her being a missionary had much to do with who she was. I think more who she was made her a good missionary. She loved working with people, young people. When she was in college, and a couple of years after, she took 3 of her nephews camping out to the Black Hills. This was before Mount Rushmore was even a thought. She may have taken her nieces as well, but my male cousins were the ones that told me about it and how much fun they had. Small town schools only went to 10th grade. If you were going to college, you went away to academy at one of the colleges. You stayed in dorms and then came home on weekends. My mother attended academy at Dakota Wesleyan University in Mitchell, South Dakota, which was about 35 miles north of her hometown of Tripp. During her time that she was at the university, she began to volunteer with the YWCA. The Ys were very active in Mitchell. They had programs going for young people that the churches didn't have. She loved that it was interdenominational, although it had a really strong Methodist presence, because it was a Methodist university. Because she wanted to teach teenagers and young adults, the YWCA was a good choice. After she graduated from college, she returned to her hometown, where she taught English and literature in the 9th and 10th grade. She also had students do plays that were open to the townspeople. She loved Shakespeare. Her favorite was A Midsummer Night's Dream. Again, my cousins remember attending and really getting to laugh at Puck. Here I'm going to read a passage from a talk my mother gave, probably when she was living in Claremont, California. After 2 years of teaching, I attended our YWCA National Training School in New York City. It was a mountaintop experience for me. There were not only students from the US, but from many other countries. 3 were from China, and there were YWCA secretaries on furlough from there. We studied under great men and women in that school and had the privilege of taking classes at Columbia University and Union Seminary. I was greatly impressed with this whole worldwide organization of women, organized by women, for women, and working with women and girls in many countries. They were pioneers in the work with girls who had left their homes and were working in industry. During the year that I was in New York, they made a great decision. Men of great wealth in industry did not look with favor on the YWCA because they were exposing things concerning long hours and low wages. They threatened to withdraw their support. The organization said that they would rather continue with the support of smaller amounts from many people instead of the support from the wealth of a few who were exploiting child labor. These women knew that Jesus meant all women and girls here and over the world when he said, "I am come that you might have life and have it more abundantly." During that year, Miss Grace Kopek, the National General Secretary of YWCA in China, was at the training school, recruiting secretaries for work in China. She had a worldwide vision and a special vision for work with the women of China. She saw what taking factories into that country would mean to those women and girls. My mother became one of those recruits. She was a terrible sailor. The least expensive way to visit another country was by freighter. They had facilities for passengers, but no frills. My mother's pet peeve was that the only thing that she could keep on her stomach during the crossing was ginger ale. The cost was not included with the food. It was a bar item. She had a great deal of fortitude and determination, though. During furloughs, she visited Japan, Korea, the Philippines, all, of course, by ship. I heard several stories over the years of those eventful sailings. She really wanted to see as much of the world as she could. She went to Nanking for 6 months language school and was sent to Fuzhou. This is a city above the mouth of the Mingyang, which at that time was referred to as the Ming River. Their residents, I have lost some pictures here. This is just an idea of where it is located. Fujian is now the name. It's right across from Taiwan. There's another picture, a little more general area. Right on the China Sea. This was a view of the harbor. And this was one of her groups of students. And the, as I said, it was above the river, and their residence was high. It was 150 stairs on a hill overlooking beautiful fields. This represents just the last few of the stairs that they had to climb every time they went home. There, her work was in part to teach health. The woman doctor in the group told the secretaries to make the girls breathe so deeply that they would pop the bindings around their chests. TB was very common, and having healthy lungs was a great deterrent. Also making them understand that the desire for tiny feet was not something that was desirable. It was only the very wealthy women that had this happen, but it didn't mean that the other girls would love to have had those tiny feet. My mother's statement, as my feet were growing very fast, is, "You will have a good understanding," or in other words, a good foundation. My grandfather's death at the end of her second term was the reason she did not return to China. She felt that she needed to be closer to her mother. She went to work in Sioux Falls, South Dakota at the YWCA there, set up and led many programs for young women. She was there for about 10 years until my pastor father asked her to marry him. He had known her when he was a pastor in her hometown when she was teaching there. He was older than she and getting ready to retire. They had me and moved to the Black Hills to raise chickens. This was in many ways a harder life than she had ever known. Very rural, no electricity, did have indoor plumbing. When they moved there, help was easy to get because it was during the Depression. The war came along and all able-bodied men were gone, either to fight or to man the factories. Not able to stay, they followed my older half-sister to Southern California, moved from San Diego area to Whittier while I was in high school. My mother wanted to be closer to her other family members, those who she had worked with in China and South Dakota. Many were retiring to the Claremont area. She really wanted to move into a retirement community with my father after I graduated, but he wanted his own home. He passed away the summer after I graduated from high school. Mother began to look for a place for herself in the Claremont area and found a place that was in the building process. Once she was there, she began to travel. She visited many friends around the United States. She was a team teacher in the First United Methodist Church in Claremont for most of the rest of her life. She took a year off and went traveling. First to the British Isles, where she stayed with friends who had a house exchange. They saw most of the islands together. Then she went to Austria to a home of a friend and traveled much of that area. Met someone who was driving to Rome, and this was very typical of how she met people and just did things impulsively. She was invited to go along. From there, she joined a tour that she had set up from the United States to go to Greece, Italy, the Greek Isles, and then into Egypt, where she rode a camel, and then to Palestine. She was scheduled to go to Israel, but when she got to the airport, they said that no one could go into Israel from Palestine. If she'd known before, she would have gone to Palestine and then Egypt, and then to Israel. Unknowing travel agent. She really loved to travel, to meet people. She never met a stranger. She really listened to people when they talked and met them where they were. My mother wasn't a preacher. She was a doer. She led by example and by making it possible for me to be in places and with people who were inspiring. Church camps, youth conferences. I'm sure she realized that children don't listen to parents as well as they do to others. When my half-sisters and I were clearing out my mother's place after her death, my sister Catherine said she wished she could be half as sure in her faith as my mother was. She had never known her to have any doubts when it came to her beliefs. And now I'm reading a short blog from that Charlotte Linden's cousin is a missionary nurse in Kenya. And she would have liked to have been here, but she's visiting her family in Iowa. Ashley and Mike McCurry were missionaries in Kapsawar, Kenya, East Africa. They grew up on farms near my hometown in Iowa. Dr. Ashley McCurry, let's see, I have more pictures here. Oh, I'm sorry. That's Ashley works in obstetrics and pediatrics. Mike helps with construction of schools and medical facilities. They have 4 children, and this is the photo. And the nurse says, just another day in the neighborhood over here. I haven't shared any hospital stories lately, so here is a glimpse of my day. It's 4 a.m. The neighbor's endangered rooster is already crowing. The day starts with a call from maternity. My first patient was a mama in need of a C-section. A healthy baby girl joined our world this morning. After a nap on the couch and a quick breakfast, I'm called back to maternity for another C-section. The world is blessed with a second healthy baby girl. Now that my work in the operating room is done, I start my normal rounds. My first patient is my favorite patient. Please don't tell the others that I have a favorite. She is a beautiful 5-month-old, malnourished little one. By God's grace, her mama's hard work, and my limited knowledge on malnourishment, she's growing well and gaining weight like a pint-sized champ. Next, I head over to maternity, where I counsel a husband and wife for infertility and make a plan for referral for further lab tests. It's about this time that I get wind of not only our hospital's blood shortage, but a national blood shortage. I'm also informed that one of my CS mamas is anemic. There's no blood available. The 2 of us just happen to have the same blood type. Off I go to the lab to donate blood. It's quick and relatively painless, and the lab staff rewards me with a bottle of Coke. Not a bad deal. Back in maternity, I round out my 7 new mamas, then head to the newborn unit. My precious patients in the NBU range from preemie babies to a baby with meconium aspiration, to neonatal jaundice with a beryllium high enough to cause keratosis. I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. I also stopped to write a referral for one baby to go to the city for a cranial ultrasound. Heading out to the NBU, I'm stopped by a mom with tears in her eyes. Her baby has the meconium aspiration, and she's scared. I take a few minutes to explain things to her, encourage her about the improvements her baby has made so far. Relieved, she thanks me, and I continue on my way. What a way to have a day. And now Ruby has a little bit to say.
I've been asked to tell you about Lois Schmidt. We've got a picture, there she is, a missionary teacher to Nigeria. I met her first when she was home on furlough from there. It was she who introduced me to her cousin, Irvin Schmidt. And you guessed it, he became my husband. So she became a cousin to me. Lois was born and grew up in Point Pleasant, south of here. She was a member of what is now Point Pleasant United Methodist Church. After graduating from our church-related college in Lamars, Iowa, she taught a school for a few years here. Then she dedicated her life to teaching school and Bible in Nigeria. The first years, she taught the native children. Then for a few years, she taught aspiring Nigerians to teach. The last of the 34 years that she spent in Nigeria were spent teaching at the high school provided for the children of missionaries, government and oil company workers, and the like. I'm sure some of you here recall hearing her speak as she did to our United Methodist women. She was deceased in 2008, and I miss her because she was a very good friend. Thank you.
And now, as we remember these missionaries and think of the ones that are serving now and the ones that are going to be serving, like hopefully some of our young people, let us be generous with our tithes, our gifts, and our offerings.